Well, I'm going to try to sing a little simple song, but my voice has been coming and going like terrible, so it's liable to just go any second. So if y'all know the words, sing along with it. I'm going to tell you a little story first, if I can remember it all. I hope I can. It's about the man that wrote the song and how the song itself came about. This fellow's name was Stuart Hamlin, and he was a cowboy star back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and had a radio show all the way up through the 40s in Los Angeles. In fact, he had the #1 radio show out there, and he played cowboy music and interviewed movie stars and knew everybody, and he was a pretty rough guy. He liked to drink and carry on and fight and get in trouble and gamble and just pretty much do everything he wanted to do. Well, all the way through the 40s, he was kind of like this. And in 1949, his producer booked a preacher to come on his show. And he didn't really want him on there. He said, my listeners are not going to want to listen to this stuff. But he let him come on there, and he was a young preacher who was having a revival there in Los Angeles. And after the end of the show, the preacher said, "Why don't you just come out and listen, to our presentation tonight?" He said, "Well, I don't know if I will or not, but he showed up out there. And he kind of liked what he was hearing. He enjoyed the music and everything. And he went back the next night. And the next night he didn't enjoy it so much. He said later that the preacher was talking directly to him. He knew it. He said the whole time he was just a nervous wreck and didn't much appreciate it. So him and his wife went home that night after the second night, and he started drinking. And just got so overwhelmed with guilt that they went and found the preacher's hotel 2 o'clock in the morning, pounded down the door till the preacher let him in, and they sat there and talked till like 6 o'clock the next morning. And at the end of that, he got saved. Him and his wife both got saved. And so he went on back to his radio show and his life and everything, but really quickly saw that it wasn't going to work anymore. He found he couldn't play certain things and couldn't do certain things, and just shortly after that, the producers came to him and said, "We want your sponsor to be an alcohol company." And he said, I can't do that. He said, "I'm a Christian now." He said, "I cannot do that." And they said, "Well, you're fired." So they put him out on the street, and Hollywood all knew about it and all heard about it. So all his old buddies turned against him. He couldn't get a job, couldn't get nothing. He had made some decent money, so he wasn't about to starve to death. But he had no money coming in. He was like in his late 40s and didn't know what he was going to do. So it went on like this for a few years, and they was just kind of barely getting by. And one night, just before Christmas, in fact it was Christmas Eve, his next door neighbor invited him over, him and his wife over for a little get-together they were having. Neither one of them wanted to go because they were so down, and the wife just said, "I'm not going to go. You just go and put in an appearance and then come back, So he did. He went over and talked to the neighbor. He hadn't talked to him in a long time, and after a little bit the neighbor said, "Word's got around Hollywood that you got religion, and you're not acting like you used to act." And he said, "How in the world can you give up all this, the drinking and the partying and everything?" He said, this was your whole life." He said, "Well," it's no secret what God can do. And my friend, he said, "What he's done for me and others, he can do for you." And they went on home, or no, before he left, the host was walking into the door and said, that's a good line that you told me." He said, "You ought to write a song using that line." So he went on home, walked across the lawn there to his house, and they got ready to go to bed, and he couldn't sleep. And his wife was getting ready to go to bed, and he came back downstairs right about midnight, and he was going to get some milk or something. And just as he got to the bottom of the stairs, the grandfather clock chimed midnight, and he thought, there it is, there's another day gone. He said, you know, what's tomorrow going to bring? It's now Christmas Day. And he said he got the idea right there. He said he went in the kitchen and sat down with a piece of scrap paper and a pencil and wrote this song. And he said he thought for sure he'd been working on it for hours and hours. He said, I'm not going to wake my wife up. It's got to be way early in the morning. He said he looked at the clock and it had only been 17 minutes. And he said, so he went upstairs and he got his wife and come back down and played it for her, and she loved it, of course. And so he went ahead and wrote the music, the rest of the music to it and everything, and then published it as quickly as he could right after Christmas. And that song and one other song that he wrote pretty much sustained him and his family the rest of their lives. It made more than enough money to make up for the radio show and everything else that he had done and lost. And one other little thing, well, for the preacher that he met with back in 1949 was Billy Graham, and that was Billy Graham's first revival, the first tent revival in California. And the next door neighbor was John Wayne. So he said there were a lot of hands in writing this song. He said the first time I performed it at a show, a little old lady came up to me and said, you know, you didn't write that song. You just got the whole of the pencil. And he said, you're right, ma'am. He said, just don't let the ASCAP people know, because I'll have to share my royalties. And one other little note about the song. When they rebuilt the National Archives in Washington, D.C. in the mid-50s, they put little samples of things in the cornerstone. And they put the original manuscript of this song in there, in his handwriting on the paper bag. And so it's in there, you know, for as long as that remains. I'm going to try to sing this, and my mouth is dry as dust. So I don't know what's going to come out. If y'all know the words to it, sing it along with me. The chimes of time ring out the news, another day is through. Someone slipped and fell. Was that someone you? You may have longed for added strength, your courage to renew. Do not be disheartened, for I have news for you. It is no secret what God can do. What He's done for others, He'll do for you. With arms wide open, He'll pardon you. It is no secret what God can do. There is no night, for in His light you'll never walk alone. Always feel at home power can conquer you. Why, God is on your side. Take Him at His promise. Don't run away and hide. It is no secret what God can do. What He's done for others, He'll do for you. With arms wide open, He'll pardon you. It is no secret